My name is Sofia. For 25 years, I believed that the warmth of a home was built on sacrifice. I worked 3 jobs in the rainy streets of Seattle to ensure my son, Ethan, never felt the sting of poverty after his father walked out on us. I thought I was building a future. I didn't realize I was building a monster. It was Ethan's 30th birthday, a milestone. He was celebrating in the suburban mansion I helped him buy by draining my retirement fund. I arrived late, soaked to the bone by a sudden Connecticut downpour, carrying a handmade quilt of family heirloom. I knocked, but the door stayed locked. Through the tall French windows I saw them. Ethan, his wife Chloe, and her wealthy friends laughing under crystal chandeliers. I saw Ethan look at the door. He saw me. He saw his mother shivering in a cheap raincoat, dripping water onto his expensive porch. He didn't move. Instead, he leaned over to Chloe, whispered something, and she laughed, pulling the heavy velvet curtains shut. They left me outside in the cold, as if I were a stray dog ruining the view of their perfect life. "He's just embarrassed, Sofia," I whispered to myself, trying to stop my teeth from chattering, but deep down, I knew. To Ethan, I was a reminder of a past he wanted to bury, a past of budget meals and secondhand clothes. I sat on the porch steps, the rain turning into a deluge, feeling the weight of 30 years of motherhood crashing down on me. I was invisible in the very world I had created for him. Suddenly, the blinding headlights of a black Rolls-Royce swept across the driveway. It was a car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. It belonged in a movie or a high-security estate. The engine purred like a predator. A chauffeur stepped out with a massive umbrella, opening the rear door with a level of respect I hadn't seen in years. Out stepped Eleanor, my mother. I hadn't seen her in a decade. We had a falling out because I wanted to make it on my own without her millions. She stood there, wrapped in a charcoal cashmere coat, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the storm. She looked at the closed curtains of the mansion, then down at me, shivering on the wet wood. Her eyes, usually cold as flint, flared with a terrifying white-hot rage. "Sofia," she said, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain like a blade. "Is this how the son of a Davenport treats his mother?" I couldn't answer. I just looked at my boots. Eleanor didn't wait for an explanation. She looked at the house I had paid for, the house Ethan called his own, and she didn't see a home. She saw an insult. She turned to the chauffeur and a second man who had stepped out of a follow-up SUV. "Mark," she said to the man in the suit, who I realized was her head of legal affairs. "Who owns the deed to this land?" Mark adjusted his glasses. "Technically, it's held by the family trust you control, madame. The son is merely a tenant at will." Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a hurricane. "Good. Then this structure is an eyesore on my property." She looked at me and squeezed my shoulder with a grip of iron. "Get in the car, Sofia. You've spent long enough in the rain. It's time for the clearing to begin." Inside the house, the music stopped. Ethan must have seen the Rolls-Royce. The front door finally creaked open. Ethan stood there, looking confused, his silk shirt slightly unbuttoned. "Grandmother? Is that you? We didn't know you were coming." "Please, come in, the party is just starting." He didn't even look at me, standing right next to her. Eleanor didn't move. She didn't cross the threshold. "I am not your grandmother tonight, Ethan," she said, her voice echoing off the foyer walls. "Tonight, I am the landlord, and you have failed to maintain the most important part of this property, its soul." Chloe appeared behind him, her eyes widening as she recognized the jewelry Eleanor was wearing. "But grandmother," Chloe chirped, trying to sound sweet. "We were just... The doorbell must be broken. We didn't see Mom out there." Eleanor looked at the heavy curtains she had just seen Chloe close. "The curtains aren't broken, Chloe, but your lease on this life is." She turned her back on them, walking toward the car. "Mark," Eleanor said as she reached the door of the Rolls-Royce, "call the contractors. I want this lot cleared by Monday. Tell them to start with the furniture Ethan bought with Sofia's money." Destroy everything that wasn't earned with honor. Ethan's face went gray. He finally realized that the storm outside was nothing compared to the one he had just invited into his life. The interior of the Rolls-Royce smelled of old money, expensive leather, and jasmine. As the heater warmed my frozen skin, I looked at Eleanor. She wasn't just my mother. She was the matriarch of the Davenport line, a family that had owned half of the valley before I decided to run away to find real life. For years, I thought her wealth was a cage. Tonight, it felt like a fortress. I told you, Sofia, Eleanor said, staring straight ahead as the car pulled away. Pride is a luxury you cannot afford when you are raising a snake. She wasn't talking about me. She was talking about Ethan. I had shielded him from the Davenport name, wanting him to be humble. Instead, I had made him think he was the center of the universe. We arrived at the family estate, a sprawling stone manor hidden behind iron gates and ancient oaks. Eleanor led me to the library. Mark has already started the process, she said, gesturing to her lawyer. That house in the suburbs? It was never Ethan's. I bought it through a shell company years ago to keep an eye on you. I let him believe his hard work paid for it. My heart skipped a beat. You mean he's been living in your house all this time? Eleanor nodded. And since he decided that his mother isn't good enough to step inside during a storm, he has forfeited his right to be a tenant. In 72 hours, the electricity will be cut. In a week, the demolition crew arrives to remodel the lot into a private park. I felt a mix of horror and a strange, cold satisfaction. I thought about Chloe, who spent her days posting photos of her marble kitchen and her designer walk-in closet. Everything they had was a lie, built on the silence of a grandmother they had ignored for years because they thought she was just a lonely, old woman in a ranch. The next morning, the first move was made. Mark, the lawyer, arrived at Ethan's door with a formal eviction notice and a team of movers. I watched through a secure video feed from the estate. Ethan was in his silk bathrobe, holding a coffee cup, looking at Mark as if he were a ghost. There's been a mistake, Ethan stammered. I pay the taxes. I own this. Actually, Mr. Davenport, Mark said, using the family name Ethan had tried to hide. The taxes are paid by the Davenport Trust, and the trust has decided to reclaim its assets. You have 3 days to vacate. Any furniture not cleared by then becomes the property of the trust for immediate disposal, Chloe began to scream in the background, her perfect life evaporating. Ethan tried to call me. My phone buzzed on the mahogany table, his name flashing on the screen. I didn't pick up. Then he called Eleanor. She answered, but she didn't speak. She just let him beg into the silence for 3 minutes before hanging up. A Davenport never begs, she whispered to the empty room. And a Davenport never forgets a slight. By the second day, the social media storm began. Chloe's friends found out about the eviction. The same people who were laughing at me through the window 2 nights ago were now deleting Chloe from their contact lists. In the world they lived in, poverty was a disease, and Ethan and Chloe were now highly contagious. Ethan showed up at the gates of the Davenport estate that afternoon. He was disheveled, his expensive car blocked by the security team. He was shouting my name. Eleanor looked at the monitors and then at me. Do you want to see him, Sofia? Or do you want to see the woman you were before you sacrificed your life for a boy who wouldn't give you a towel? I walked to the gate alone. Ethan looked at me through the iron bars. Mom! You have to talk to her. Tell her to stop. Chloe is losing her mind. The bank froze our joint account and people are taking the furniture. It was just a joke, Mom. We didn't see you in the rain, I swear. I looked at him, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger wearing the face of a boy I used to love. The rain wasn't the problem, Ethan, I said quietly. The problem was that you looked at me and decided I was worth less than your curtains. You didn't just leave me in the rain, you left me in the past. So stay there. I turned around and walked back toward the manor. As I reached the front door, I heard the sound of heavy machinery in the distance. Eleanor's remodeling crew had arrived at the suburban house early. The deconstruction of Ethan's hollow world had officially begun. By the third day, the suburban mansion looked like a battleground. Movers in gray uniforms were hauling out the velvet sofas and the Italian marble coffee tables. Ethan stood in the empty foyer, his voice cracking as he yelled into his phone. He was calling his father-in-law, a man who had always praised Ethan's business acumen, but the call went straight to voicemail. Again, Chloe was sitting on a lone suitcase in the middle of the driveway, her mascara running down her face. She was scrolling through her Instagram, watching as her best friends posted photos from a yacht party she wasn't invited to. One friend had even blocked her. The social climbing she had spent years perfecting had turned into a vertical drop. "We'll go to my parents," Chloe finally said, standing up and wiping her face. "They have the guest wing. They won't let us stay on the street." Ethan looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. They piled what was left of their designer clothes into Ethan's sports car, the only thing Eleanor hadn't seized yet, and drove toward the wealthy enclave of Aspen Ridge. When they arrived at Chloe's parents' estate, the gates didn't open automatically. A security guard walked up to the window. "I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Miller," he said, using Chloe's maiden name. "Mr. Sterling has instructed me that he is out of town for the foreseeable future." To all visitors. "Out of town? I'm his daughter," Chloe screamed. But the guard just pointed to a black car parked across the street. It was Mark, Eleanor's lawyer, leaning against the door with a calm smile. He had already visited Chloe's parents. He had reminded them that their textile business relied heavily on shipping contracts owned by the Davenport Trust. Helping Ethan and Chloe meant financial suicide. Chloe's father, a man who valued his balance sheet more than his blood, had made his choice. He sat behind his darkened study window, watching his daughter cry at the gates, and he didn't move. The world of the 1% was a shark tank, and Ethan and Chloe were bleeding. They ended up in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the neon sign flickering vacancy like a cruel joke. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and disappointment. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "How did this happen, Chloe?" "One day we're the power couple, and the next we're this." Chloe looked at him, and for the first time, there was no love in her eyes, only resentment. "Your mother happened, Ethan. Your poor, simple mother who turns out to be a Davenport. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me treat her like a servant if she held the keys to the kingdom?" The blame game had begun. Back at the Davenport Manor, Eleanor and I were having dinner. The silence was heavy. I looked at the empty seat at the long table and thought of Ethan. "Is it too much, Mother?" I asked softly, "destroying everything he built?" Eleanor put down her silver fork and looked at me with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "He didn't build it, Sofia. You built it with your sweat, and I built it with my legacy. He only decorated it with his arrogance," she said. "If a tree is rotten at the core, you don't prune the branches. You cut it down so something healthy can grow in its place." That night, Mark brought us a report. Ethan had tried to sell his sports car, but the title had a lien on it from a loan he'd taken out, a loan now owned by the trust. He was effectively penniless. "He's asking for a meeting, Sofia," Mark said. "He says he wants to apologize. Truly, this time." I looked at the video feed of the motel. I saw Ethan pacing the small room, looking like a caged animal. I felt a twinge of the old motherly instinct to protect him, to tell Eleanor to stop. But then I remembered the rain. I remembered the sound of the curtains closing. I remembered the laughter behind the glass. "Tell him I'll meet him," I said, standing up, "but not here. Tell him to meet me at the old bus stop on 5th and Main, the one where I used to wait for him after my double shifts at the diner. If he wanted to find his mother, he had to go back to where she actually lived." The bus stop at 5th and Main was exactly as I remembered it. Cold, smelling of wet asphalt, and illuminated by a flickering neon sign from a nearby laundromat. I stood there, wrapped in my grandmother's vintage coat, watching the expensive cars drive past. For years, I was the woman invisible in the crowd, waiting for the bus after a 12-hour shift just to see Ethan for 10 minutes before he went to sleep. Ethan arrived on foot. He had walked 3 miles because he couldn't afford a taxi, and his sports car had been towed that morning. He looked like a shadow of the man who had closed the curtains on me. His designer shoes were ruined and his silk shirt was stained. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the little boy who used to cry when he lost his toy. But I knew better now. "Mom!" he choked out, stepping under the rusted metal roof of the bus stop. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what Chloe was thinking. She was the one who said we should wait to open the door. I was just caught up in the moment. You know I love you, right? Please, tell grandmother to stop this madness. We're sleeping in a motel." I looked at him, my heart feeling like a piece of cold flint. "Ethan, you didn't know what Chloe was thinking? You were standing right there. You looked me in the eyes through the glass. You didn't just let her close the curtains. You smiled when she did it." His silence was all the confirmation I needed. The apology was just a script to get his bank account back. "I was wrong, okay?" he snapped, his true temper flaring for a moment. "But does that mean I deserve to lose my house? My reputation? My life?" I leaned against the cold metal pole. "You didn't lose your house, Ethan. You lost mine. You didn't lose your life. You lost the illusion I paid for. Now, you're just living the life I actually had while I was raising you." Suddenly, a black SUV pulled up. Mark stepped out, carrying a single envelope. Ethan's eyes lit up. He probably thought it was a settlement or a key. Mark handed the envelope to me, not him. Inside was a bill, a detailed invoice for every cent I had gifted Ethan over the last 5 years, from his Ivy League tuition to the down payment on the mansion. "What is this?" Ethan whispered, looking at the total at the bottom. It was over $2 million. "It's a debt, Ethan," Mark said calmly. "The Davenport Trust doesn't give gifts to strangers. And since you've made it clear your mother is a stranger to you, the trust expects repayment. With interest." Ethan began to tremble. "I can't pay this. I don't have a job anymore. Chloe's father fired me this morning." I stepped closer to him. "Then you'll have to do what I did. Work 3 jobs, wait for the bus, wear clothes until they fall apart. Maybe then, in 20 years, you'll understand why that quilt I brought you was worth more than your car." He fell to his knees on the dirty sidewalk. "Mom, please, don't do this. I'm your son." I looked down at him, and for the first time, I felt no urge to pick him up. My son would have opened the door. "You're just a man who looks like him." I turned to the SUV, but Ethan grabbed my coat. "Wait, what about Chloe? She's pregnant." I froze? A grandchild? The thought hit me like a physical blow. But then I saw Mark's face. He shook his head slightly. He had already checked. "Ethan," Mark said, his voice full of disgust. "We've seen the medical records Chloe tried to forge to get a stay on the eviction. There is no baby. It was just another lie to keep the house." Ethan's face went white. He didn't even know his own wife was lying to him. Or perhaps he was in on it. It didn't matter. The rot was complete. I pulled my coat away from his hands. "You lied about a life to save a house. I sacrificed a life to save a son. We are not the same, Ethan." I got into the SUV. As we drove away, I looked back through the rear window. Ethan was left standing alone at the bus stop under the flickering neon light, clutching a bill for $2 million. He looked exactly like I did 30 years ago, alone and penniless, but without the one thing that made me survive: a clean conscience. "Where to now, Sofia?" Mark asked. I looked at the Davenport manor glowing on the hill in the distance. "To the demolition site," I said. "I want to watch them tear down that house. I want to see the dust rise so the air can finally be clear." Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of lead. I stood at the edge of the property in the suburbs, wearing a hard hat and a heavy coat. Beside me stood Eleanor, leaning on her silver-topped cane, her eyes fixed on the house I had once called a dream. The yellow excavators were already in position, their hydraulic claws twitching like prehistoric monsters. Ethan and Chloe were there too, standing behind a police line. They had spent the night in their car after being kicked out of the motel for a lack of funds. Ethan's face was a mask of disbelief as the first blow struck the master bedroom window, the very window where they had closed the curtains on me. The sound of shattering glass was the most beautiful music I had heard in years. Chloe tried to scream something at me, but the roar of the engines drowned her out. She looked smaller now, her designer clothes wrinkled and stained, her status falling away with every brick that hit the ground. I realized then that people like Chloe don't have a soul. They only have an outfit. Once the outfit is gone, there's nothing left. By noon, the second floor had collapsed. I watched as the luxury kitchen with its marble islands and gold-plated faucets was crushed into gray powder. That kitchen was where Ethan had toasted to his success while I was eating a sandwich in a diner. Now, it was just rubble. Eleanor turned to me and handed me a heavy iron key. "This is for the safe in the manor, Sofia. It's time you stopped watching things fall and started building." I didn't look back at Ethan as I walked to the car. I didn't need to. I knew that he was watching the only thing he ever valued disappear into a dumpster. We drove back to the Davenport estate, but we didn't go to the library. We went to the boardroom on the top floor of the Davenport Tower in the city. The board of directors was waiting. They looked at me with a mix of curiosity and fear. They knew I was the prodigal daughter who had returned, and they knew Eleanor didn't tolerate weakness. I took my seat at the head of the table, Arthur's old seat. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady, "we are going to restructure the trust. We are moving away from luxury developments and into social housing. We are going to build homes for people who actually work for a living." One of the older directors cleared his throat. "But Madame, the profit margins on social housing are—" I cut him off with a look. "The profit is in the people, Mr. Harrison. I spent 25 years being one of those people. I know exactly what they need, and I know exactly what they are worth. If you don't like the margins, you are free to leave." No one moved. After the meeting, Mark brought me a final update on Ethan. He had tried to get a job at a local firm, but his reputation was ruined. No one wanted to hire the man who had been publicly disowned by the Davenport matriarch. Chloe had left him that afternoon, taking the last of her jewelry and disappearing into the city. The power couple had lasted exactly 4 days without money. "He's working at a warehouse, Sofia," Mark said, dropping a photo on my desk. "The night shift. Loading crates." I looked at the photo. Ethan looked exhausted, his hands covered in grime, wearing a cheap neon vest. He looked like the people he used to mock. I felt a pang of sadness, but I didn't feel regret. He was finally learning the value of $1. I decided to visit him one last time, not as his mother, but as his employer. The warehouse was owned by a subsidiary of the trust. I walked onto the loading dock at 3 a.m. Ethan was leaning against a stack of pallets, breathing hard. When he saw me, he didn't shout. He didn't beg. He just looked ashamed. "The work is hard, isn't it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I never knew. Mom, I never knew how much you had to do just to keep us afloat." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old handmade quilt I had tried to give him on his birthday. It was slightly singed from the chaos at the house, but still warm. I laid it on the crates next to him. "Keep this," I said. "It's the only thing I'm giving you. It's a reminder that warmth isn't something you buy with a credit card. It's something you earn through sacrifice. When you can look at this quilt and not feel ashamed, you can come and see me, but not before then." As I walked away, I heard him start to sob. It wasn't the angry sob of a spoiled child. It was the quiet, broken sound of a man who had finally hit rock bottom. I got into my car and looked at the city lights. I was 53 years old, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't running away from the Davenport name. I was using it to change the world. 1 year later, the site where Ethan's mansion once stood had been transformed. It was no longer a monument to ego, but a vibrant community park named after Eleanor's father. I stood there watching children play on the grass where a cold porch once stood. I had spent that year learning the true power of the Davenport name, not to exclude, but to build foundations that actually hold. I had taken full control of the trust, and Eleanor had retired to the coast. Finally satisfied that her legacy was in safe hands, my life was no longer about 3 jobs and survival. It was about strategy and impact. But despite the luxury of my new office, I kept one thing on my desk: a small, framed photo of the old bus stop on 5th and Main. It reminded me that the most important view isn't from the top of a skyscraper, but from the ground up. Ethan had changed too. He didn't come back begging for his inheritance after a month. He stayed at the warehouse for the full year. He moved into a small, clean apartment in one of the new social housing projects I had launched. He was no longer the man in the silk bathrobe. He was a man who knew the weight of a crate and the value of an honest hour. On a quiet Sunday morning, I received a package at the manor. It wasn't a legal demand or a bill. Inside was the old patchwork quilt, perfectly cleaned and mended. Attached was a small note in Ethan's handwriting. I can look at this now without feeling ashamed. Can we have coffee? Somewhere simple. We met at the same diner where I used to work double shifts. I arrived in my own car without a chauffeur. Ethan was already there, wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans. His hands were still calloused, but his eyes were clear. We didn't talk about the trust, the mansion, or Chloe, who had long since moved on to another victim. We talked about the quilt, about the rain, and about the long road back to being a family. "I didn't just lose a house that night, Mom," Ethan said, looking down at his coffee. "I lost my soul. Thank you for not letting me keep it that way." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time in years I felt a real connection to him. He wasn't my investment anymore. He was my son again. The Davenport empire was strong, but this moment was the real wealth. As I walked out of the diner, I looked at the city and felt a deep sense of peace. I had survived the storm, reclaimed my heritage, and saved my son from his own arrogance. My name is Sofia Davenport, and I've learned that the only doors worth locking are the ones that keep out hate. The doors to the heart must always remain open, even in the rain.